Hey, my name is Caleb Cleveland, and today we're going to be going over the case study from Chapter 8 of our Consumer Behavior and Decision Making book. And this case study was titled Anti Smoking Advertising: Can You Be Scared into Quitting? So let's dive right on into it. First off, just a little overview is that researchers were finding that it was not effective having just facts and data on the effects of smoking made public. People weren't actually being convinced by just reading the data that said, hey, if you smoke 1 pack a day or even half a pack a day, then you are much more likely to die than any of these other diseases, whether that be um, too much sugar or cancer or health or um, obesity, all those things combined. Smoking was still the number one killer. And so they began to turn to advertising and to persuasion and other means to try to find out ways of how can we actually convince people that this is harmful to you. So that was really the beginning of it all. They were seeing that facts weren't enough and that persuasive messaging was needed. And so they began to do a number of different things. Firstly, they started to actually place messaging on the packs of every single cigarette. And so it was right there in front of the people. And then they began to turn to advertising as well. And they began to say, okay, what is it that we actually need to begin to do to convince people to stop doing this? So they began to try to understand why were certain groups of people smoking in the first place. And one interesting thing they found was that kids, mostly teenagers, were smoking as a way to actually rebel. And so they began to say, okay, what type of advertising messaging can we have towards them? And they came up with a pretty interesting slogan. This was actually the most interesting thing to myself personally that I read in the case study. And the angle that the ad makers went for was by saying, are you really rebelling by giving all of your money away to old white guys who are running these businesses? And I thought that was really pretty creative, actually. That they did find, okay, they saw that they were rebelling against this and that they were using this as an excuse, and they found a pretty convincing argument against that to say, hey, is this really the best way for you to rebel if you're going to do it? I thought that was really interesting. Another way that they tried to convince people against it, and this is going to be a pretty large part of the information I'm going to talk about today, was by convincing them not to smoke by showing them ads featuring people who had been adversely affected by smoking. And so this really opens up the conversation for the fear appeal side of the case study. And just to give you a quick understanding of what a fear appeal is, it's basically when someone showcases to people the horrible things that could happen if that consumer or that person were to do or not to do something. So it's basically a tactic that seeks to convince someone by scaring them into doing something. In this case, that something is not smoking. So we learned from the case study that a fear appeal, that they're most effective when they're used against prevention-focused people. Now, these are people who are most concerned from possible negative outcomes. So basically, a fear tactic, which is where you say, hey, look, if you begin to smoke, look at all the things that are going to happen to you. Look at this person that has a voice box in their throat now. Those are most effective against someone who already thinks in the terms of saying, oh, I probably shouldn't jump off that cliff because I might break my leg. They are fear preventative people who make their decisions and who process things based off of a fear of hurt or fear of the negative consequences. So then this goes into the concept of habituation and how did that concept actually affect the consumers of these ads. Now, habituation refers to the decreased response to a stimulus based on the amount of times that you are exposed to it or that you see it. It occurs when a consumer becomes so familiar with an advertisement or a message that they stop noticing or reacting to it at all. And this type of repetition is actually helpful for brands. Sometimes it's very helpful for brand awareness, and it can really be used for subconscious type of advertising where you are slowly becoming more and more of a household brand or a name that someone understands without them maybe even knowing it. But excessive use, as the book points out, can lead to a decreased attention or even a less of an emotional engagement with that product. So the case study really talks a lot about how marketers must balance that repetition with the variation to actually with variation to maintain that type of consumer interest in it. And over time, even with these types of fear uses and these types of fear reactions, like these smoking advertisements, audiences can get used to that shock content, which can actually weaken the ability for that to be used on them. So we were also asked to do a little bit of an understanding and look into these approaches versus promotional approaches. So we've already talked a fair amount about fear approaches. They're used against people who are very preventative in nature, and they're often used by showing all of the negative things that can happen when something is done or when something is not done. And so they're really shown this is why you should avoid something. Promotion focused individuals are oftentimes motivated by growth or achievement or aspirations. And so they love to see something and say, and are shown, this is why you should do this thing. This is what this could help you achieve. So the biggest difference between this fear promotion and this fear approach and this promotion approach is the emotional framing that the advertisers make. So a fear approach will really appeal to the warning against that failure, and the promotion will appeal to the inspiration or to the potential for progress. An example that I came up with for this was with the World Wildfire Fund. So this is a fund that basically seeks to prevent fires and prevent those types of natural destruction from happening across the world. And so you can look at this and see different angles that they have even come up with before, or that they could potentially come up with to help either to engage with those who are fear motivated or with those who are promotion motivated. So the slogan that I thought of for those who are fear promoted would be protect the earth today before it's too late. So that concept is saying we are spurring you to action now in order to stop something bad from happening and in order to make sure that it doesn't have to happen. And that really goes down that angle of saying, if you don't do something now, then these bad things will eventually happen. And so in that way, they're trying to really promote them to do something, namely to give funds. The promotion motivator would be, together we can build a thriving planet. And that way they're saying, support us, give us money because you can be part of this great thing. You, by doing this, can lead to a better world. Both angles are asking you for the same thing. They're just hitting a different emotional response to you. Now, curiously, I find that I'm pretty affected by both different methods, both the fear and the promotion. But I would say that for myself personally, a promotion-based advertisement is probably going to be more convincing for me because I'm a big fan of being a part of something that is doing good things, and I'm a positive and optimistic person by nature. And so I would much rather look to something and think of something that can cause benefit and that can do good in the earth rather than just living in that fear mindset. Although I will say that the fear mindset, I'm sure, works on everyone to an extent, can still be pretty convincing. So to wrap this up, this article was pretty fascinating to me. And the concept of using advertising on different clients, on different customers to different ends, having that different emotional response, and in particular, thinking of who is it exactly that my product is reaching? Who is it that's using my product? And in this day and age, when we look at the technology, the amount of data being used, we as consumers are known better to those providing the products than ever before. And so to think about the ways that advertising and this type of emotional appeal based on how you react is likely just going to improve and become more sophisticated the longer that we're surrounded by it. And that's a pretty scary but also pretty interesting and sometimes exciting thought to have. To think that in this regard, when you're helping people, when you're doing something good, you're preventing them from harming themselves in this way, it actually would be beneficial, right, to continue to know them better and to become more sophisticated in the way that you can reach those audiences. Because really, they're not doing much. They're not really saying anything different than the data shows. The data shows if you smoke, you will likely die. Your increase rate is X amount more. And so they're not telling us anything new. They're just telling it in a different way, and in a way that can be better heard and better understood. And that's something that's very fascinating to me. Thank you for listening and for your attention.